Feel free to call and ask Tom Burke from the E3G think tank whatever your question related to climate change is and what you as an individual can do about it. It's such an overwhelming topic. It's been with us for a long time. It's going to be with us for a long time. That you might imagine there's not much that you as an individual can do. But there is.
18. That we have 12 years back then, 2018, within which to make the critical decisions that will avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. So we blew 3 of those years, unfortunately, because the United States was not at part of it, and we're the second largest emitter, and other people said, we don't have to take it too seriously because the president's against it. So now we're in the exact opposite. President Biden is seized of this issue. We know we have to deal with it and move fast.
Of course, we need countries to do their bit, companies to do their bit. But what about us as individuals? So many people want to do the right thing, but the right thing is not always obvious, or maybe it doesn't seem like value for money. Tom Burke will do his best to help. 0345 6060 973. Another good reason for talking about this now is because this week Allegra Stratton spoke up. Now, she speaks for Boris Johnson on the COP26 climate conference, and she wrote an article for the Daily Telegraph suggesting things we could all do. Let me quote from it. Did you know you don't really need to rinse your dishes before they go into the dishwasher? Does your brand of plastic bottle shower gel come as a bar in cardboard packaging? I bet it does. It might be freezing half a loaf of bread when you get it home to get out later in the week rather than throwing half of it away when it goes mouldy. It could be walking to the shops, not driving. Micro steps maybe, but all the more achievable because of it. The words of Allegra Stratton, who speaks for Boris Johnson on the COP26 climate conference. Well, what about you? Are you taking these micro steps? Are you taking them and wondering whether they're doing any good? Maybe you've got a bigger question about a purchase or a change in your home life that might cost you a lot of money and you're wondering whether it's worth your while. The climate change warnings becoming even more pronounced this week. What can you do? Feel free to call and ask the advice of Tom Burke, who chairs the E3G think tank. He was an advisor to the UK government on environmental policy. 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. Tom, welcome back to the programme. How are you?
I'm good, Eddie. Thank you. I'm cool.
You're cool.
Unfortunately, I'm not as hot as I don't mean I'm cool culturally. I mean I'm cool physically because it was so hot last week. I felt really uncomfortable, but I'm feeling much better today.
Climate change, eh?
Climate change indeed.
Let me ask you first about the Allegra Stratton business. There were some unwelcome headlines for what she said, in part because she suggested people might want to join Greenpeace or even join the Green Party as well as joining the Conservatives, so she got it in the neck for that a bit. But these micro steps she talked about, did she deserve the ridicule she got from some people?
No, she didn't deserve the ridicule she got. She was actually responding to something that's really important for us to understand, which we've seen incidentally throughout the pandemic, the COVID crisis, that people want to do the right thing. Most people in this country, when they see that there's a problem, and boy, people are seeing, as the Met Office has told us, there's a problem with the climate, they want to do the right thing. And Allegra did her best to give people some ideas. Now, you can argue they were the best or the worst ideas, but she at least tried to respond to that aspiration of most people in this country to do the right thing. And so I think it was brave of her. I think the criticism came from fairly predictable quarters.
Let me ask you about that. Well, we talked about this before, but I think it's always worth articulating. The sense that we as individuals, whatever we do, isn't going to make that much of a difference. And I'm talking about the small things, the recycling and all of that, never mind deciding whether we buy solar panels or electric cars. The sense that we as individuals, we have a small amount of power when it comes to climate change, but is it going to make much of a difference to global temperatures if we throw all our rubbish away and not recycle?
It's really what matters about that point. And you're right, Eddie. Each individual is not going to make a difference. We're not going to be Atlas. We're not in our own lives, on our own, going to save the planet all on our own. And what matters about the kind of leadership that's given is that together, if we all do lots of small things, the kind of things Allegra was talking about, wider range of things she didn't mention, if we all do them, they add up to a massive contribution. But even that's not enough, because government still has to play its part and do the big things like change the power system or change the transport system. Only government can do that. But those changes by government will only work if individuals play their part. And individuals will play their part if they're given the kind of right lead from politicians. And I'm not sure that we're getting that kind of lead from politicians yet, really.
Let's hear what people want to ask you, Tom. Are you ready?
I am indeed.
Okay, Tom is ready and he's cool. Here's James in Plymouth. James, what do you want to ask?
Hi, Tom. Hi, Eddie. Thanks for taking my call.
Hi.
I was wondering, why is it that meat and fish consumption is rarely discussed in this context? It's all electric vehicles, solar panels, recycling and all that. It seems to me like not everyone can afford solar panels or an electric vehicle, but everyone can, surely, the majority of people can, perhaps not go fully vegan, God, that would be mental, but perhaps cut out meat or reduce meat and fish consumption 1-2 days a week, just doing those small changes that you've mentioned. Why is it that that's rarely considered? Is it because it's too personal?
And before Tom comes in, I take it you've made those sort of changes, James, have you?
Yes, yeah. So I, more of a trial than anything. So I'm in the military and I was going on a course, a physical course for 12 weeks, and I thought, no real build-up. I was like, we'll see what happens. I'll cut out meat for 12 weeks and see how it goes. And then since then, I've just been easing myself off. But in the military context, they don't actually acknowledge veganism, so you can only go so far, unfortunately.
So you struggled a bit.
Yeah, like they do the token effort of one vegetarian meal per option, but you ask them about veganism and they look as if you just sprouted two heads.
Oh wow! It's like being in the 80s.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
All right, let's get an answer then from Tom. Tom.
Actually, James, meat. The whole issue about meat is talked about quite a lot in the policy discussion. We don't hear very much about it from the politicians, partly because they're a bit afraid of being accused of being the nanny state and telling us what to do. But you're absolutely right about how important it is to do that. And actually, the people who've been tending to lead that charge in an awful lot of families around the country are the kids. Kids have been very wound up about climate change, and one of the things that they tell their parents about is exactly that issue about changing your diet. The way you can change your diet is a way to make a contribution. But, what doesn't work, I think, is trying to shame people into doing things. People should do what they're comfortable with, because then they'll do it again. It's no point trying to make somehow people feel bad that they're not playing their part if they don't suddenly become a vegan. That would be very good if the military were to go vegan.
Yeah, it just seems like it's more of an education piece, or like it's just never even considered or even put out there in terms of, I think the vast majority of people can agree that greenhouse gas emissions is bad for the environment. Everyone can agree on that. Same way that, internal fuel combustion engines need to be drawn down eventually if the infrastructure is there, and that burning fossil fuels for energy is bad. However, I don't think there's much in terms of sort of a knowledge of the impact of, global meat trade and all that, and how much that has much larger effect. And it just seems like they're kind of missing a trick, even just putting the information out there a bit more and kind of, not trying to be a nanny state, but try to, encourage reduction, small changes, I'd say.
I was just going to say, James, one of the things I might suggest you do is talk to some of the young people that you know and ask them to point you at the kind of websites. There are literally hundreds of websites where you can look at the kind of individual personal things you can do. You can take advice. And my experience of kids these days is they're so alert to this stuff that they're as good a person. In a way, they're educating the adults much more than adults educating the children. So have a conversation with some of the young people that you know.
Thanks for the call, James, and thanks to you, Tom. Tom Burke with us till 5.
Sage. Get your business taxes right first time.
What can individuals do to combat climate change? Tom Burke is with us till 5. He chairs the E3G think tank. 0345 6060 973. Here's Jack in Windsor. Hi, Jack. What do you want to ask?
Oh, good afternoon to you both. So myself and my partner are quite active environmentalists. We do as much as we can. I'm plant-based myself. She eats less meat and dairy. We do things like have our own water bottles, don't use plastic cutlery, pick up litter as much as we possibly can, but we still don't feel like we're doing enough. But then my partner's family do something as simple as recycle their plastics once a week and think that's it, we've done our bit. So I think my question is, where can someone specifically go to know, probably not just, again, put it down someone's throat, they're not doing enough, but what else they could be doing?
And you also want to do more yourself, even though you're doing a lot?
I think it's the question me and my partner asked ourselves, we don't feel like we're doing enough, even though we try, and do as much as we possibly can.
Okay, Jack, and we've also got a similar question from Graham for you, Tom. I'm 58, been vegetarian since I was 22. I can't afford holidays or a car. I walk most places. Bus fares are expensive. I wear 5 layers in winter. What else can I do? There's more people doing their bit and they want to do more.
And there's a lot more that they can do. And there are enormous number of different places to go to find out particular things that you can do, and a lot of those things are local. So it's quite important to engage with all of the local groups that you are, and increasingly with local government, which enormous number of local governments in this country have made net zero pledges and therefore are starting to do things in their communities. The thing not to do, I think, is to think it's only you, and therefore to work with and to engage with others. So one of the simplest things that Graham can do is make sure he's talking to his neighbours, make sure he's talking to other people in his community, he's talking to his family, he's asking them what they're doing, he's sharing what he's doing. The people we trust most about this to each other. We don't trust the media that much, we don't trust politicians, we don't even necessarily trust all those environmental organisations, but we do tend to trust each other. So really important way to spread this kind of engagement is to talk to each other. And what happens, and we've seen this in all kinds of issues, not just on climate change, is that when people see other people doing something, they join in. There's a tremendous instinct for people to join in, especially now that we've all got such a consciousness of just how serious the problem is. But there's no recipe for it.
And for Jack, talking to his family, he doesn't want to shove the environmental message down their throat, and he's obviously a good example. How should he try to engage? You should always assume that people are doing the best they can and help them to do a bit more. As I said to James from Plymouth, you can't turn this into a blame game and somehow I'm better than you by doing something. If you do that, you'll push people away. Much better thing to do is to ask people to tell you what they're doing and help them to reach out to do a bit more. So that it's a cooperative effort, not a competitive effort. I'm better than you. Here's a tweet from James. I repair dishwashers. Oh, this is coming back to Allegra Stratton. If you don't rinse your dishes before putting them in the dishwasher, you will not only reduce the life of the machine and incur repair costs, and you'll be washing your plates in dirty, greasy water. Not very hygienic. Here's Max in Ealing. Hi, Max. What do you want to ask?
I've heard the reply to the previous question, and I suppose my question in a way is similar. I'm a bit isolated. Not isolated. I live in a block of 22 flats, and I've got neighbours, but it's the kind of place where everybody goes out to work in the morning and comes back late in the evening, and half are owner-occupiers, half are tenants, and everybody's got high rents or mortgages to pay. So you pass the time of day, but you don't really discuss what are you doing about this or that. My issue is, for the first time, I can make my first conscious decision to adhere to the climate change dilemma, and I need to change my boiler. I have a gas boiler. As far as I know, everybody in this block has a gas boiler, and I'm vaguely conscious of heat pumps and electric systems, and I've looked online, and it's astonishing that gas boilers are apparently not going to be manufactured in the relatively near future, but there are just loads and loads of adverts for replacing gas boilers and very little else. And if you look at what there is with regard to electric boilers and what the other heaters, what are they called? I can't even remember the name. It's very, very confusing for a guy like me, nearly 80 years old, with a family, you've got young children and other things to worry about. And I just don't find it sufficiently clear. I mean, I know gas safe is a real reassurance. If you want a gas boiler, go to somebody, gas safe. But what is electric safe? What is heat pump safe?
Well, let's see if we can get some help to you from Tom, Max. Just stay right there. Hi, Tom.
Well, what I was very interested in the way Max described the situation in the building he's living in, that he doesn't have all that much interaction with his neighbours. So one thought I had as I listened to him saying that was one of the first thing he could do, because his neighbours have exactly the same sort of issues and the same things they know or don't know as he does. Maybe the first thing he could do is to actually have a meeting with his neighbours, to invite them to a discussion about what they can do with the building, so that you're looking at what can be done together in the building, not just what can I individually do in my flat. And what you find when you start talking to your neighbours is actually you discover that some people know this bit and another person knows that bit. You discover your pooled knowledge is a little bit bigger than your individual knowledge. And again, it's what you hear from other people that you trust. And you'll find that there will be people in that neighbourhood, in your community, as it were, your building, who know which other sources you might go to start looking. But there's no single place that you can go to get all the answers you need to these questions. But it's much better to be exploring them with other people. And so use it as a way to not only do something for the climate, but also to enhance the sort of viability and the neighbourliness of your community. The one thing you can be sure of is nobody's going to think you're strange coming, knocking on their door, wanting to have a conversation about what we can all do about climate change.
And on replacing gas boilers, and I appreciate, ask for information. Do you have any environmental thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, there's been some really misleading stories about the government having somehow decided we're going to get rid of gas boilers in the next year or few years or something, and that simply isn't the case. There's no decision been taken on that. If we're going to get to net zero, we will have to stop burning gas. That's absolutely clear. But we're not going to do that overnight, and we're not going to do that without a lot of supportive government policy. Now, the government has recognised the importance of there being a coherent policy that people can have confidence in. The problem is they keep delaying publishing what that policy is, which would give people a sense of how soon they've got to act and what the different options are. So we need a bit more from the government if we're going to get a good answer to the question. But there's no question about where we've got to get to. We've got to get to a point where we're not burning gas to heat our homes. There's a very wide range of options for what you do instead, but which option depends on where you are. Depends what kind of building you're in, whether you're an owner-occupier, whether you're renting, whether you're part of a social housing network. There are lots of different answers. Which one suits you will depend on where you find yourself and how the government policy provides for that particular situation.
Max, thank you for the question. I just want to reflect with you, Tom, a lot of the texts which are saying something similar to the point I was making right at the start of our conversation. 70% of the planet's pollution caused by 100 companies. There's also text from Paul in Bedford which says the same thing. I'm an XR, I've participated in the rebellions. It's heartbreaking and validating to see the media suddenly take notice, but the public need to know that just 100 companies are responsible for 71% of carbon being pushed into the environment. That sense of us as individuals, and yet there's this much bigger problem.
Yeah, but I think there's a bit of a tyranny of big numbers in saying there's 100 companies. The world is a little bit more complicated than 100 companies, not the least, because the only reason those companies are currently declaring very large profits is because we are all continuing to buy their products. So it's a little bit of a let-off to simply blame the companies. Not to say, well, if the companies are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, why isn't government doing something to regulate those companies more? Do you see what I mean? You can't just scapegoat one actor in a problem which we've all playing some part in creating the problem, and we've all got to play some part in solving the problem.
Thank you, Tom. Tom Burke, who chairs the E3G think tank. He was an advisor to the UK government on environmental policy. He's here till 5.
Eddie Mair on LBC. With Sage, powering local businesses to boss it.
What can we as individuals do about climate change? Tom Burke is here. He chairs the E3G think tank, and Joe is on the line from Bristol. Joe, fire away. Hi.
Hiya. I'm just wondering if we use a certain amount of gas to heat a house, when gas bill's around £300 a year, so around 10,000 kilowatt hours of energy. If we move that energy over to electrical energy, which is 6 times the price, how is anyone going to afford that? Even with Economy 7, it's still 4 times the price. And if you use a certain amount of energy to heat a space, it doesn't matter whether it comes from gas or electric, assuming that a gas boiler is almost 100% efficient already. How is anybody supposed to pay to heat in the future?
Tom?
I think Joe's put his finger on exactly the real task that government faces in getting this right, is who's going to pay as we make the transition from a fossil fuel dependent to a decarbonised energy system. How are you going to make people pay? And how those bills will fall in the future depends, for instance, on questions like why do you pay VAT on house renewals, which would allow you to improve energy efficiency and drive your bills down, whatever it is, but you don't pay, you don't pay VAT on your fossil fuel. So there's an issue about that, about how does government go about balancing these things. We pay for tax on some fuels and not on other fuels, so there's an advantage actually to gas, which is partly what keeps that discrepancy between his electricity bill and his gas bill going. So you can't just simply wish away these issues. You really do have to think them through at a policy level, and government has to get them right. When it comes to doing things like, for instance, replacing gas boilers or installing heat pumps, then the question is how does government use the fact that it can borrow money at a very low rate as a way of making that capital available to people, homeowners, at a lower rate than their mortgage company would make it available to. So there are a lot of different measures you can do. We have 4 separate bits of this problem. We have a problem with power, and we have a problem with carbon use and mobility. We also have a problem with heat in people's homes, and we have a problem with, exactly as you're describing, with food and with agriculture. Really important that we solve the problem with power and transport right away, because we can do that very quickly, in order to buy time to solve the longer, more difficult problems which involve us in our daily lives having to make changes, and which will take longer to bring about. So first of all, important to get that this isn't right now the most urgent aspect of the problem. So I'm glad that we're talking about it now, because it is going to be much more difficult to solve. And it's a problem which you solve not simply by economics, but also culturally, in the way that we choose to live, in how we, as it were, watch what each other's doing and copy the things we like, how we listen to our children as they argue for doing things to change our diet. It's going to take a combination of measures to change the way in which we organise our, as it were, personal lives, and that's going to take longer to bring about. So the really important thing is to get on right now with dealing with power and mobility, which we know exactly what we've got to do and how to do it, and buy some time so that we can deal with these more difficult problems of people's individual contributions a bit further down the track.
Here's Galvin in Lincoln. Hi, Galvin.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Very well. How are you? Tell me about your efforts on climate change.
So we're sort of, I've been working now for about 3 or 4 years, introducing a new product on the market. So it's better breath running down the other end of the yard. So it's an eco heating system that gets skimmed into pasta from Germany. So we're trying to push the green credentials of the company. Heating a house, average 3-bedroom house, using about 3,800 watts. So it's a real game changer.
But is this new technology making you out of breath, Galvin? That's my concern.
Sorry. I wish I had the phone call. I ran down to the end of the yard to ensure I've got good reception on the phone.
I'll let you get your breath back. Let's have a listen to Tom. What do you say?
Galvin is making a really important point, that this is not simply about constraining bad behaviour. It's about taking the opportunities of making a transition to a cleaner and decarbonised economy. About 60 to 70% of the heat that of the fuel we burn ends up as waste heat from fossil fuels. So it does nothing for the economy, doesn't improve our quality of life, it's just literally waste. And if we decarbonise our economy, we're removing that waste. And we do that by all those opportunities, the kind Galvin's describing, a lot of other opportunities, are a way to make our economy work better, as well as keep the climate safe.
And just one final thought. It's a very brief text, Tom, but it may speak for many people's view. It says simply, Eddie, it's far too late now. We've done the damage.
I liken this disease, I get told off for doing something. Climate change is a bit like diabetes, type 2 diabetes. It gets progressively worse the longer you go on, and the later you start doing something about it, then the worse it gets. So it's too late to do anything about the climate we used to have. That's absolutely true. But if we don't do something now, very quick and very big, then it will get a lot worse than it currently is.
Tom, I can't thank you enough. I'm just wondering, finally, you've spoken a lot about how community action is important. We should talk to our friends and neighbours. Do your neighbours, when you knock on they're like, oh, it's Tom again. He's going to bang on about the environment.
No, because I've learned a long time ago that the last thing people want to hear from me is some preaching. You're not going to solve this problem by preaching. It's a problem we share. We're all in it. We've all got to live in the climate-changing world. We do better if we try to help each other do a bit better.
It's been very useful, Tom. Thanks so much. We will do this again. Tom Burke, who chairs the E3G think tank. He was an advisor to the UK government on environmental policy. And Simon